This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon.
I'm not sure if you've heard, but the 2026 election is going to be kind of a big deal in Michigan. But before we get there, before we take on Democrats in the ultimate battle of Michigan, we have to fight the civil war of 2025. My guest today is consultant Scott Greenlee. He's a candidate for Michigan GOP party chair. So far, we've talked to the other three candidates. We've heard from Senator Jim Runstead. We've heard from Meshawn Maddock. We've heard from Ambassador Joseph Sella. Today, Greenlee is going to share his vision. And next month in Detroit, the people of the Republican Party will decide who's going to lead the Michigan Republican Party into a new era, into 2026, into the ultimate battle for Michigan. As I see it, the next party chair has three basic duties as relates to winning elections. First, there's candidate recruitment. Not favoring a particular candidate, that's different, and that's not appropriate. More making sure that there's enough candidates to fill every seat. That is appropriate, and that has to happen. People in Michigan vote for candidates. They don't vote for parties. Don't let that smooth taste fool you. Democrats are down right now, but 2026 is a lifetime away. Party affiliation, even Donald Trump affiliation, can't be counted on. Not sure if you've heard, but Donald Trump's not going to appear anywhere on the 2026 ballot. Who will, how many of them, how hard they run, of what quality, will decide Michigan's future. The party chair needs to be a steady hand, not a thumb on the scale. This person should have connections to the past, when Michigan Republicans were great. They should be able to call a John Engler or a Rick Snyder and the people who built their administrations. But they should also have a hand on the pulse of the future. Who are the city councilmen who could be county executives? Who's a county executive who could run for governor? Who's the businessman who could run for U.S. Senate? Second, the party chair has to be able to raise money and partner with the wider conservative movement. We've talked about this before, but candidates for governor in Michigan don't win elections. Candidates paired with ballot initiatives win elections. The party chair has to look beyond the party itself and invest in the ecosystem of conservative causes. The party chair has to have plans to create in Michigan the very vast right-wing conspiracy that Democrats have feared for decades. Third, the chair has to be able to get out the vote. Without Donald Trump's name on the ballot, efforts have to be made to register voters and turn them out. But Trump also left some breadcrumbs behind. He succeeded getting low propensity voters to the ballots. And so you don't just have to create new voters, you have to take some of these new voters who are irregular and turn them into regulars. And so if there's going to be a conservative era and not just a one-night stand, plans have to be made to reach out regularly to all the members of the coalition. At this point, it doesn't matter who believes what. It matters who votes for what and in what amount. Scott, thank you so much for joining me on the Enjoyer Podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. You've made some very, very good introductory points. I think they're all spot on.
Thank you. Thank you. Scott, we'll start with the standard first question, my favorite question. What do you enjoy about Michigan?
You know, I've lived here my entire life. I'm not somebody who went away for a job or went away for college or what have you. And Michigan is just a beautiful state, both from a natural standpoint to the people, to the variety of things and options that we have here. People talk about all four seasons, and that's true. I'm a golfer. I might like a little longer golf season, but you know, the winter in Michigan is wonderful too. And again, it's that grit that our Detroit Lions are showing right now. It's that tenacity that Michigan was built on people.
Yes.
And the work that those people have done that have benefited folks around the globe. And there's just a sense of belonging and strong work ethic and philanthropy that I love. I can't imagine being anywhere else.
Absolutely. Scott, some of my favorite podcasts are like this, where I haven't met the person before and we're getting to know each other for the first time. So I'm getting to meet you alongside with the people listening today. This is new to all of us. So if I could do the record scratch question, how'd you get here?
So grew up in Grand Rapids in 1984 at East Kentwood High School. I was selected to play Ronald Reagan in the school mock election.
Really?
So I started studying about Reagan. I watched as many speeches as I could, and read newspapers back in that day, and what have you, and learned his policies, learned what he stood for, and in the process learned what a real Republican platform looked like, and many of our issues. And like Reagan, I got to say, I walked into school on mock election day, and we cleaned house. Republicans won top to bottom. It was a lot of fun. Then I got to Grand Rapids Junior College, and I said, wow, they don't have a college Republican club. That seems strange because I'm a Republican, and I know there's other Republicans around. And the Michigan Republican Party had reached out and said they wanted to start a club. And so I raised my hand. I was the founder and the first president of the Grand Rapids Junior, now Community College Republicans. And since that time, I've been involved in politics at one level or another all the way through. So, we're going on close to 40 years of political involvement. I've been a precinct delegate for most of that time, heavily involved with the grassroots and various grassroots movements throughout that amount of time. And I'm just passionate about it. So I feel that I'm well qualified, I'm prepared, and I bring a lot of things to the table that I'm sure we'll talk about as we go through this for the position of chair of the Michigan Republican Party.
Absolutely. It's so funny because, you had that Reagan moment in 84. I was born in 1984. So someone younger than me, certainly, if they wanted to play Reagan, they'd start with Google.
Yeah.
And I still remember the days. I mean, I was blessed. My dad sold world books. I still have them in the corner of the room I'm recording in right now. So we had access to a lot of this knowledge. For our young listeners, help them understand what researching Ronald Reagan in 1984 looked like.
So it involved reading the Grand Rapids Press, because I didn't really have access to a lot of other papers, but my mom did get the Grand Rapids Press. So I went home and started reading that every day and looking for every article and bit of analysis on Reagan. I watched a lot of TV. I was the weird kid who would watch the Sunday morning talk shows after church.
Oh, you were that kid?
I was, yeah, man.
I was that kid, yeah.
Guilty.
It's a problem.
And then I talked to my mom. I mean, she educated me a lot on just, she was a Republican, and she talked to me about Republican values and what we stood for and what she had observed with Reagan and how he had risen to lead the state of California and then won the 1980 election handily over the recently departed Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
And, so I took all that knowledge and I talked to my political science instructor, and kind of went from there. But yeah, there was no Google, there was no social media, there was no, we had 3 or 4 TV channels. I don't know which we were up to at that point. There were ABC, NBC, CBS, PBS. And that was about it. We had an early version of cable, which I don't think had a lot of news. I think it was more for ESPN at that point because I'm a sports junkie, so I'm always watching sports. But it was basically that stuff, and I went from there. But I liked what I heard, and more importantly, even as a young person, I liked the Reagan results. I liked the fact that our country was moving in the right direction. I liked the fact that we were respected on the world stage. When you take a look at the fact that, hours into his service as president, we had the hostage situation that was terrible in the Middle East resolved. America was back. And in a lot of ways, people who didn't get a chance to see that are going to see it right now as America is back with President Trump. We're going to be a force on the world stage again. We're going to have respect. I looked at Reagan as a young 16, 17-year-old and thought, wow, this is fantastic. This is what our country needs. I don't want to say that I used the phrase America first because it wasn't a phrase at the time, but that's the feeling I got that, hey, America's back, like we're doing great. Reagan's leading the way. And it was a proud moment to kind of understand all that. And it was also really weird to try and talk to a lot of my classmates about that because, again, they were doing other stuff, a lot of them.
And it's, I think that moment, that December 1980 going into January 1981, it felt a lot like December 2024 going into January 2025, where it did feel like the malaise was over. It felt like it was time to compete. It
Yeah.
was time to win again. You had permission to win again. And it's like the cap was lifted and you could just feel it in your bones. Even, I'm sure people half our age and, can feel it right now. Um, and man, like, could you imagine? It's the counterfactual no one wants to wrestle with.
Yeah.
Imagine if a week from now we were about to inaugurate Kamala Harris
Uh,
and Vice President Tim Walz.
well, I'd rather not, frankly.
It's almost unthinkable.
Yeah. You know what was interesting is in 1984, we all kind of knew what was going to happen. The question was, how big was it going to be? And as a young person studying government and politics, I can remember watching election night and the whole map turned red. And then there was one state, Mondale's home state, that stayed white. And they couldn't call it until 11, 12 o'clock at night. It went obviously very narrowly to Walter Mondale. This year, while we knew the map wasn't going to look like that, I kind of felt the same way. I kind of felt, a good 6 to 8 weeks out that, hey, we've got to work hard. We've got to turn out every vote. We've got to reach out to the low propensity voters like you've talked about. We've got to campaign to a large group of people who haven't necessarily always been Republican or always towed every piece of our platform. But if we continue to do that, we got this. I really felt that. When you look at the results President Trump got from 2016 to 20, and then the results, if I can call them that the Biden-Harris administration gave America between 2020 and 2024. And just talking to friends of mine who aren't necessarily overly political, it was like, hey, there's no two ways about it. Like, we can't keep going down this path.
No.
There's no way. And even friends of mine who don't appreciate the president and don't like the president as much as you and I may, they were saying, I got to go in there and I got to vote for him because we have got to do things like support our law enforcement. We've got to do things like fix this economy. We've got to do things like return stability to America on the global stage. And when I hear people who are independent or even your soft Democrats talking to me like that about 2 months out, I thought, okay, pedal to the metal. It's just a question of how much. And it was wonderful to win all 7 of the quote unquote swing states. It was great to
that was huge.
States. Seeing gains in states like California, were kind of
New Jersey.
Yeah.
New Jersey, could wind up being a swing state next time.
That's correct.
I think they said New Jersey, even though Republicans won Arizona, New Jersey was actually closer than Arizona. So just maps that you could not have imagined.
Right. I felt confident we would return to President Trump all along. But yeah, as we got into that last 6 to 8 weeks, I thought, okay, this is going to be really, really good. So
why run for Michigan Republican Party chair? And, you're a consultant. What would your 2026 plan be if not this?
That's great. So I'll answer the second question first because it's an easy answer. And then I'll go through qualifications and why I feel I'm the right person to lead this organization at this moment in time. If I'm not elected chair of the party, I would anticipate that I will continue to be a consultant. I will work with a gubernatorial candidate, a senatorial candidate, work to keep the state house, work to win the state senate back. Typically, over the last several election cycles, I've had anywhere between 6 and 8 what I call consulting clients, where I'm doing strategy. I'm working with them on a regular basis. And then I've had a number of other clients that may purchase their yard signs through my company or may do other things that are more retail in nature. So that'll be what I do because I believe in the movement. That's what I did, the last decade and a half professionally. And I've had good results. So I'll continue doing that. Now, why make the hop from being a private business person behind the scenes working
Right.
impact politics into this role. Every cycle we say this is going to be the most important cycle ever. And
Yes.
honestly, I don't think it's hype. I think we mean it. I think
It's actually true every time.
Yeah. And when you look at what the governor, the attorney general, and the secretary of state have done in the state of Michigan the last 6 years, and it's going to be another 2 more years, we have got to right some of these wrongs. We have got to correct policy. And if we don't win all 3 branches of government, which means holding the House that we just won back, and Speaker Matt Hall is off to a great start as Speaker 72 hours in, talking about giving subpoena power and, really forcing the Democrats to come to the table and negotiate for the first time in 2 years and things along these lines, where we could actually have a bipartisan government. Imagine that. What a novel concept for a lot of Democrats. Then if we don't win the state Senate back and hold the governor's office, we can't undo some of the crazy policies that they passed in their 24 months of unfettered power, where they wouldn't bring Republicans to the table. They wouldn't negotiate in committee hearings. They wouldn't allow opposite points of view to be brought forward. They would limit, if ever allowing, debate on many issues. It was just crazy. Unfortunately, for the citizens of Michigan, they were so unorganized and there was so much infighting in their own party, they couldn't get 100 to 150 extra pieces of bills through in lame duck. Things like giving those who've entered our country illegally driver's licenses and all sorts of things along these lines that they wanted to get through. Fortunately, they weren't able to, and it was their own fault because they had all the power in the world. We've got to win back the Senate. We've got to win the governor's office, and we've got to hold the House and keep Matt Hall leading that charge. And if we do that, 27, 28, we can correct a lot of wrongs. So that's real important. We also are looking at this year coming off the closest U.S. Senate rate Michigan has had in years. Mike Rogers got real close to beating Alyssa Slotkin. And in my involvement in the party, which goes back 40 years, we have won one U.S. Senate race. I can't figure it out.
Yeah, 1994.
Yeah, I was a volunteer for Spence. I knew him. I can't figure it out. Like, we can win statewide races, obviously. We win governor races. We win attorney general races and secretary of state races, even when the governor is a Democrat. We've done that with Secretary of State Terry Land and Attorney General Mike Cox historically. But for some reason, they seem to always get us in the Senate. So we've got to take that seriously. And I think that Gary Peters being up in 26 is something that not enough people are talking about, because he has been a absolute non-bipartisan, solid liberal, rubber stamp vote for the Democratic liberal agenda. And as Michigan just showed, we're not exactly all about that. And part of the reason that Michigan showed that is President Trump talked about policy more than he talked about party. It's people over policy, and it's policy over party. And if we talk policy to people, if we sell them on that, they're going to naturally flow to the Republican Party. So this is a critical election cycle. And I feel I have the demonstrated executive leadership ability in 3 walks of life: business, nonprofit world, and politics. I have connections in every part of this party because, again, as more and more people come into the party, as we grow this party by inclusion, not by exclusion, and trying to purify it, not by taking somebody who might have had one bad vote 10 years ago and saying, oh, they're an awful rhino, they're an awful whatever, but instead saying, hey, I didn't agree with that, but will you help me with President Trump? Will you help me with governor candidate, whomever? That's the way to build things. So I have contacts and connections because I've been around a little bit in every part of this party. And I conduct myself and will continue to conduct myself in a very open communication policy. Everybody's got my cell phone number. I was at an event last night in Livingston County. I said, hey, my cell's on my brochure. Make sure you call or text if you have other questions. Somebody after the meeting said, you're going to change that if you get elected, right? Like, you're going to have 3,000 people, that are delegates having your phone number. And I said, no. I said, I've had that number for, 25 years. Like, you will always be able to reach directly out to the chair. It might take me a day or two to get back to you, but I'll get back to everybody. So we're going to communicate. We're going to make sure every voice is heard so that the best ideas can come to the top. I understand I've got some good ideas, but I understand it's nowhere near the sum of the masses of the different ideas that come in. And it's often the brand new people to any organization in business, in politics, in NGO and nonprofit world that look at things differently because they're not jaded by historic, experiences and ideas.
This is how we do things. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to listen to the new people. We've got to welcome their ideas. We got to vet everything out and make sure we're doing the right things. We've got to really involve the delegates, and we've got to be transparent in how we raise money and what we do with that money. That's been an issue. People have had questions. Donors have had questions, and sometimes they've stopped contributing because they just don't know. Grassroots people have had questions. Why did the party decide to do this? Why did they do that? What's happening here? I will work with the budget committee on the state committee to make sure that this is as transparent an organization as we've had, because I've done that in the nonprofit world where we have to treat donor dollars differently than we would treat business and corporate dollars. People are giving their hard-earned dollars, $5 at a time, $10, or $100,000. It just doesn't matter. Every one of those dollars has to be treated with a higher level of fiduciary responsibility, and I recognize that as a leader. I can handle the media. We talked about, the fact that I'd be out front now, so I know that I have to work with not just media that is friendly toward Republicans, or fair, I guess would be the way to put it. But the fake media is out there, and they're going to look to trip me up, and they're going to look to create issues where there aren't issues. And I've dealt with enough media in my life that I can handle that. The party will hopefully not be embarrassed. I will stand strong. I will stand steadfast for our conservative agenda, for our candidates that the citizens elect. Because you're right about not putting the thumb on the scale. We've seen historically at times people within the party have endorsed candidates in primaries. People within the party on staff who are taking a paycheck from the Michigan Republican Party that have gotten involved in primaries. That'll be a zero option for anybody who works for the Michigan Republican Party. What all of our efforts will be doing is building the infrastructure, the victory offices, having the staff and the financial resources ready so that once the public tells us who our candidates are in August of 2026, they are ready to walk into a well-oiled machine, present their ideas, present their background to the masses so we can be successful at the ballot box in November. Election integrity is I could tell you 100 things, but I'm sure you've got some more questions and areas you want to direct.
Absolutely.
Election integrity is another thing that's going to be front and center. Every Michigan voter has the right and deserves to know that their vote is properly weighted against other Michigan citizens who are only allowed to vote. They're entitled one time, and that vote, when cast, is properly counted, and the results that are recorded from every single election, bottom of the ballot to top of the ballot, are accurate.
Yes.
And we will have a large election integrity department, and we will make sure that we do everything we can to get the corruption out of elections. Our country.
What does that entail? An election integrity department?
Yeah, so it entails working with and recruiting hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers to work not just on election day, but to work at going through data on a regular basis, finding duplicates, finding things where there are anomalies, where people haven't lived in various areas, where folks are double registered, or maybe they moved their driver's license 5 years ago, but their voting is now not been moved. Really trying to provide manpower to help clean this thing up, and doing it not only at a local level, but as much as possible at the statewide level. Now, we've seen how the current governor and the current secretary of state take a look at cleaning up the rolls. And we've seen Democrats vote down removing people from the rolls who are over 120 years old or 130 years old or something like that. There were 60 some of them in the ballot, and they tried to, or in the rolls, and they tried to remove them a few years ago, and the Democrats voted it down. They said, no, we're not going to do that, because you never know, right? So we're going to try and fight that stuff. I'm also going to work with Senator Nesbitt, our leader in the Senate, who does a great job, and again, Speaker Hall, on attempting to bring much stronger penalties forward, because again, this is a foundational right, a foundational thing that our country was founded on, the right to free elections, the right to go in and have your vote count as much as your neighbor's vote, but nobody to be involved that isn't proper. And I'm going to encourage stronger penalties, more oversight. We're going to recruit not just the attorneys that we've done and that we did a good job with this November, but a lot of regular volunteers. And most importantly is training, making sure that they understand what they can and what they can't do, so that when they're at a precinct and somebody says, hey, you've got to stand over here, you can't look at this or that, they know whether that's accurate and that's the law and that is where they have to stand, or they know when they're getting played and they're like, no, here is how the law is written, and I've been trained and I understand this, and if you don't allow me to stand over there, I'm calling this number, and we're getting other folks here right away, and we're shedding a lot of light on this.
Yeah. Scott, what kind of ballot initiative might pair well with the governor's race? We've talked about this. I mean, whether it's governors, even presidential races. 2004, there was gay marriage on the ballot. 2008, there was medical marijuana on the ballot. This has affected so many races now, you can't just ignore it. What kind of initiative might pair well with the governor's race?
Right. So first of all, let me talk about ballot initiatives in general. Michigan, in my opinion, does a very poor job of ballot initiative clarity. So there are other states that have, California stands out, just a ton of ballot proposals every time. And that's because they have legislation that's passed by Republicans and Democrats that says, you can't have multiple things in a particular ballot initiative. In Michigan, you can have a 10, 12, 14-page ballot initiative. Our law requires you boil that down to 100 words or less that the canvass committee and what have you, the secretary's office approve and put on the ballot. I think we need simple, easy to read, easy to understand, no sleight of hand type of proposals. Yeah. So, for example, if we had that when we're talking about what happened in 2022 with the abortion proposal.
Yes.
Michigan became the most abortion-friendly state in the nation, tied with like New York and California when that was passed. But the way they were marketing it is just, hey, return Roe v. Wade, vote yes on this, right? But then when you read the 10, 12, 14 pages, it does a lot of other things like require a medical organization not to contact the parents of a 12-year-old who might come in and want a procedure done. Like that's buried in there. So I had downloaded that proposal to my phone, and I was going to people that I knew were pro-choice, who I was acquainted with, and saying, hey, how are you voting on this? And they're like, well, come on, Scott, so of course we're going to vote to restore Roe v. Wade. And did you know you're also going to be voting for this? Well, no, that's not true. I haven't heard about that. Oh, wait, let me bring up the thing. And I know I switched a number of votes because they said, yeah, I'm pro-choice. I think somebody should have the right to choose. But boy, this other stuff, like no way do I want to sign on to that. Right. So we've got to simplify the process. We've got to make sure voters know what they're actually voting on. In terms of policy, I think there's a few things that have been talked about. Obviously, requiring ID to vote and requiring the signature match and like not having a situation where there are the provisional ballots that are accepted and maybe checked and maybe not. That's the issue that 80% of Michigan across party lines stands for. It's a very simple issue. It's very easy to define. You can do it in 1 to 2 sentences. I think that would motivate people from both parties to vote to clean up government. There's been a talk around Lansing about our Supreme Court. And there are 2 issues with the Supreme Court that as I talk to people, they're not very happy about. One is the fact that, do you realize as long as you have a law degree and you've been an attorney and part of the Michigan Bar Association for a few years, you can run for the Supreme Court. It doesn't matter if you've ever practiced law. It doesn't matter if you've ever been inside a courtroom. It doesn't matter if you were a judge at a lower level, so you understand how the judicial system works from a judge's point of view. As long as you go get your law degree and you're a member of the Michigan Bar, you can run for or be appointed to the Michigan Supreme Court. And people that I talk to, both sides of the aisle, are surprised and find that wrong.
Doesn't sound like a job where you want people learning on the job.
No, certainly not, And also on the judicial front, years and years and years ago, decades ago, somehow somebody threw a dart at a dartboard and it hit the number 70. And they said, well, when you're 70 years old, you're no longer fit to sit on the bench, regardless of what the voters want, regardless of what capacity you're at. You're just too old. So we're just going to require that when somebody turns 70, they can no longer run for or be appointed to a judicial office. They can finish their term if they were elected at 69 or 68 or whatever, but they can no longer run for anything else. And in this day and age, I think that's crazy, because I know people that are 85, 90, 95 years old, and they're sharper than I am. Medicine is getting better. Treatments are getting better. Folks are remaining more competent by and large. There's always examples at an older age. The age limit, that people live is continuing to increase. So I don't know why we are taking the power, and why we've taken the power away from voters for decades and said, oh, you can't vote for that judge you like, that's well qualified, that has great decisions, that understands the law, because they magically just turned 70 years old.
And this is a problem in our whole society, is that often we're looking for the one rule that applies to everything. And the reason we do it is because we refuse to do case-by-case evaluations.
Yes.
We refuse to think things through and say, is that judge competent enough to continue, or are they not? Right. Whether it's 35 or 75. And so if you select for competency, you get a certain result. If you select for age, no one has to think about anything.
That's correct.
We consistently prefer the no thinking option.
Yeah. And it's really too bad, because we lose absolute stalwarts of our judicial system, frankly, on both sides of the aisle. I don't always agree, with some of the people that are there and some of the decisions that they make at the, circuit court and court of appeals and Supreme Court level. But it's not up to me individually, and it shouldn't be up to some random age. It should be up to the voters of that particular district to say, yes, they're reflecting our values, they're doing a good job, or no, I'm going to vote for somebody else because I think they're not competent, or I don't like the way that they're ruling, or what have you. And unfortunately, this archaic 70-year-old random number that's been around for decades, removes that right from the people. So I think there's a couple things that folks are interested in, both requiring more strict policies with regard to who votes, and making sure that, folks have the proper ID there, and there's no casting the provisional ballot. And then a couple reforms for our judges, I think, would be good.
Yeah. What traits are needed in the party chair?
I think you need to be level-headed, not emotional. I think you need to have the ability to listen to everyone, and that sounds easy enough, but
it sounds easy.
It's not. People who've served in leadership roles know that is a real challenge. I think they need to be available. I talked about the fact that my cell phone won't change. I'll also be traveling the state. I'll be around our delegates, listening to what they say, because in a lot of ways, they're the most important people in the party. Folks always look at reps and senators and things. Well, the lower you get, the closer you get to the ground, the more intel you get, the more ideas you get. And that's our precinct delegates. And that's how I cut my teeth in the party, and I'm still a precinct delegate to this day. So I'll be very engaged with our delegates, and I think that is important. I think, obviously, you've got to be somebody who's not polarizing to do that. You've got to be able to get along with everyone. You've got to be able to take things that you may not agree with, that you might think, well, that's a crazy idea, but still treat them with respect and vet them out properly, because sometimes that's where the best ideas come from, and you don't want to miss anything. I think you've got to be somebody who has significant business experience. I mean, let's face it, at the end of the day, you're electing a chief executive officer to oversee an organization that will be a $30 to $40 million, if it's done right, organization in a 20-month period of time with a very hard deadline and a very clear pass-fail. And you'll have issues with staffing. You'll have issues with running the operation, from insurance to banking to all sorts of things that people don't see. And so I think you need a proven, successful business professional and leader in the role. And again, that's why I jumped in at the encouragement of a lot of our precinct delegates.
It's incredible. Some of these qualifications and some of these traits that are needed, then you contrast that to if Republicans have a great year in 2026, the party chair will get exactly zero credit from the average person in
Right,
Michigan.
correct, right.
However, if it's a bad year, it's like being an offensive lineman.
It's
If
awful.
people know your name, something's gone wrong. Unless you're Dan Skipper, if people know your name, something's gone wrong as an offensive lineman.
I
Given that dynamic, what makes this worth it?
That's a great question. You know, I've got a lot of my friends who are like, "What are you doing? You have a pretty good life. You're kind of impacting a lot of things more than
Right.
behind the scenes. You don't have to deal with the media. Frankly, the job would be a pay cut. You know, like, what are you doing?" And I've always been like called to service. I've been involved in almost every type of nonprofit group, from church groups to high school clubs to the JCs to Kiwanis, where I'm very active now. I'm kind of a service group type of person at my core. And my mother, again, kind of instilled that in me when I was young. I think that it's important to have a quality leader, and not that the other three candidates don't all bring strengths and what have you. This is not derogatory in any way or respect to them. But I think I've got the right leadership ability and the right connections to really make this thing work. And I think doing that in the next 2 years is something that would be good, not just for my heart, but it would be good in terms of results for the delegates, for the committees, for Republicans, and for, frankly, all the citizens of Michigan. And is it a thankless job? Yeah. And do people look at state party chair when they're on stage at a big rally 3 days before the election with president and go, "Wow, what a great job. Oh, that's awesome. Look at that." You know, like he's got 10,000 people applauding and he's standing next to the president. What they don't see is, the Friday night at 11 p.m. phone call. They don't see the hours and hours and hours of fundraising. They don't see
Yeah.
making the very difficult staff decisions. They don't see the political strategy side of this, which we haven't talked about. I'm proud to have been part of over 100 winning campaigns in the last 40 years. At some level, ranging from city council races up to running successful congressional races, attorney general races. I've had senior staff roles on gubernatorial races, on presidential campaigns. So from a political strategy standpoint, which is also a big part of the job, I bring that to the table in addition to the general leadership stuff. And I think that's important too. So when I look at all the boxes that need to be checked, I say I check them all humbly. And because of that, I'm ready to serve. I'm ready to be a servant leader for this organization. I can walk into a meeting with the most seasoned veteran donor and present the strategic plan and ask for the check. I can also do door-to-door with the newest grassroots volunteer on a Saturday afternoon because it's important. And frankly, I did doors during the last election cycle. I was out there the election night, the election weekend just before, knocking doors in 2 different counties in the state, because that is a critical part of our success as well.
You were talking about election strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so fascinating because to me, outside looking in, I don't work for the party or anything, but I see personnel as the ultimate strategy. And so you mentioned the big 4 jobs. You got the governor, attorney general, secretary of state, Gary Peters' Senate seat, the entire U.S. House, 13, the entire legislature, another 148. Is personnel the extent of the strategy, or is there a strategy when you have 165 opportunities? Is there a strategy in addition to personnel?
I will tell you there's absolutely a strategy in addition to personnel, but personnel and having that personnel present good quality ideas and real solutions is more than half the battle. Yes, there is more. And I think one thing that sets me aside both as a consultant, where I've had success, and would set me aside as a party chair, is the fact that I have, again, different experiences in business and in the nonprofit community than some other candidates and other people have in the past. From the consulting world, a lot of my consulting colleagues have just done political work. They've gotten involved in college Republicans, they've taken a staff job, they've rolled into working on campaigns. I've led Junior Chamber International, the world body of the JCs. That's an organization that does good work for young people, leadership development and training in 125 countries worldwide, millions of dollars, a multi-currency budget that has to be managed, conventions with over 10,000 people speaking 25 different languages that I've chaired or I've been the parliamentarian for. So I've seen some of this in a different light. I've worked for AT&T for a period of nearly 10 years, so I understand big corporate structure. I've started companies and helped other people start companies and organizations and written business plans. So when I run a campaign, I take a look at it with a little bit of a different lens. I tell every client that I'm talking to, I want to run this like a business. I want measurements. I want actual budgets that we don't just write up and put in a drawer and go, oh, look at this. We have this great document.
It exists.
Right. And you forget about it, but it's a living, breathing document. And there are other things along those lines that I really don't want to go into that give me an advantage when I bring political strategy forward, whether it's for an organization, because I've been co-chair and finance chair of the Kent County Republican Party. I was a vice chair of the state party in 2009 and 10. By the way, a very similar year to 26 in terms of what's up and what the stakes are.
Yes.
And in that
was 2018 before 2018. I keep going back to these years where everything's up for grabs. Well, Republicans used to win those.
I was involved in the party then as a vice chair, and I played, there are a lot of us, I played a small role in the success that happened in 2009 and 2010. And I told people some of these speeches I've been doing around the state, these delegate meetings, I don't want to party like it was 1999. I want to party like it's 2010, because that's the year that we really partied as Republicans. We won everything. We won all the education seats. We won the Supreme Court. We brought the state house back we defended and increased our majority in Congress. Those are the goals for 2026, and those are the things I contributed to in 2010, and I'm ready to do it again.
Scott, will there be a Republican candidate for governor who can beat Jocelyn Benson?
Yes. Easy question. Yes.
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 You sound rather certain of that. Why?
Because I understand what just happened in 2024 and that people, voters, are really catching on to the dangerous policies, to the rhetoric, to the empty promises that the Michigan Democratic Party has put forward, and that, Benson, should she win the primary in particular, has put forward as Secretary of State. A lot of the games, a lot of the misusing that office, a lot of political gamesmanship. And I think people are tired of it. And I think when you contrast that with a party like the Republican Party and the candidate, whomever wins the primary, and I'm not going to get into names, but whoever wins the primary, that's going to be somebody who's got, our platform, who does things like puts forward fiscal conservative policies that are going to keep more money in the pocketbooks of every class of citizen in the great state of Michigan. Somebody who is concerned about making sure policies are properly implemented and we're not doing crony capitalism and we're not playing favorites. Somebody who supports our law enforcement and truly wants a secure Michigan. You look at some of the crime stuff going on currently, and we all remember which party, as hard as they want to run for it, led the defund the police movement, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to have a candidate, no matter who it is, that stands for those types of things. And as we've shown, when we can get that message out to a broad group of citizens on a variety of platforms, and when I say broad group of citizens, I mean every corner of the state and the low propensity voters that you were talking about, and remind them that, hey, this stuff matters. And you've got a contrast. You've got a failed party who tends to spend every dime they can take from you, who isn't particularly interested in your safety other than doing a press conference here or there, who's more concerned about DEI than actual results, versus a party that truly cares about the individual citizen, that isn't top down, but is bottom up, that will defend you, that will help you keep more of what you earn, that will be efficient and effective with regard to government and make sure it's applied equally to everybody. I think the choice will be clear.
Reading between the lines, it sounds like you see a very target-rich environment as relates to the Democrats and a very Republican-favorable environment. Then I think about Matt Hall. The other day he announced a new sheriff's in town. Our governor, Gretchen Whitmer, already is a lame duck. There's investigations now that are going to be into her, but also into our Attorney General, Dana Nessel, also into Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Help people understand who just, a lot of people, Scott, are frozen in this 2020 mentality where they remember Republicans not doing a damn thing for them. I have to tell people it's 5 years later, man. Things do change, and it's a different crew of people. Things have changed. Help people understand how the events of this year could affect the viability of a Benson and a Nessel going into 2026.
I've known Matt Hall for over 20 years. I've worked with Matt. Matt is a friend. Matt's been a client. Matt Hall is extremely intelligent. Matt Hall plays 4D chess while other people play checkers. Matt Hall is tenacious. Matt Hall is honest. And Matt Hall does not have a lot of time or energy or interest in playing games. He was elected by his colleagues to do a job, and that job is to lead them. That job is to retain majority in the 26 elections, but it's also to hold accountable people in the state of Michigan who may or may not have misused their power. It is to utilize the authority invested in him as Speaker of the House to look behind the curtain. And Matt will do that. And the good thing about Matt is he will be transparent with the results he finds. And if he finds results that don't do what you and I think they might, he'll let people know that, hey, there wasn't this or that going on. We're moving on. But there are things to be held accountable. He will do that. Far too often in this day and age, we want the media, we want the report to fill a narrative that we have. We don't necessarily want the truth. We say we want the truth, but then we want the truth only if it's this, this, and this.
We want the truth to sound like what we already believe.
Yeah.
And there's another problem where it's not just the truth that people want. People want retribution. And so when some people, when they saw that announcement about these investigations, they kind of over-infer what's going to happen next. And, okay, Whitmer's going to be impeached now. Whitmer's going to be arrested now.
Right.
No. The way I explained it, and then you see the other side where they say they're cynical. And they say, oh, what's going to result? Strongly worded letters? Reports? Yes. I compare it to a dog whose cat buddy climbs up a tree. The dog can't climb up the tree with him, no matter how much he loves him.
Right.
It's not his capability. What he can do is bark and alert people. And so our question is not, what can the Republicans do? They cannot arrest Whitmer. They cannot impeach and remove Whitmer. But what they can do is alert us. And my question is, for the 10 million people, for the 5 million Republicans, what are you going to do when you are alerted?
Well, I'm in a different role than the speaker. The speaker has got a responsibility to all people in the state, and he's got to be very fair in how he goes about it and what have you. As state party chair, I have the opportunity to frame the argument to the public, and in fact, that's my job. I have the opportunity to highlight certain things and maybe not highlight other things. And believe me, my track record shows I can do that effectively, and I will do that effectively because the people need to know. The people need to understand when there is an ignorance, a neglect, a disregard for regular basic rules and laws and policies and procedures that the average citizen takes for granted. I mean, let's face it, if you and I walked down my neighborhood or your neighborhood and knocked on everybody's door and said, hey, are you aware of the different policies that the Attorney General in the Constitution has to hold themselves accountable to? They're going to say, no, are you talking about the Michigan or the U.S. or
that's exactly. They would not know where to begin.
They're not dialed in. So part of my job as party chair is going to be to educate folks and to raise the money to do so, right?
To frame up the narrative,
and then to frame it up so everybody, or at least a vast majority, can understand and make it a talking point. Make it so that when people meet for dinner, they mention, hey, did you see the article about this? Or did you hear the podcast about that? Or did you get a piece of mail like I did that said this? And did you know that? What do we think of it? And to do it, by the way, in a fair, honest, and honorable manner. Because if we've got to cheat to win, we probably shouldn't. And there are parties and people who believe the opposite.
No, that stuff never works. I think about when I was at the Mackinac Center and at Michigan Capital Confidential, their news outlet.
Yep.
And so because of the Mackinac Center's values, you kind of are fighting with one arm tied behind your back. Then there's only certain policies they talk about. So you have kind of 1.5 arms tied behind your back, but it makes you a lot more creative. And so what I learned is to draw in people's attention, you have to present stories. You have to give them the angle of absurdity. The fact.
Yep.
It has to be a fact that is so ridiculous it can't be true, except it is.
Right.
And then I'll tell you all my boring policy stuff that I need you to know so everything's buttoned up. But I'm going to give you what you need to click and to be drawn in. And when you do, it'll be true.
And isn't it funny that when you fight for the truth, it just has a way of eventually coming out, whether it's fact checkers at Facebook, whether it's Biden's laptop, whether it's all these things that folks like you and certainly me were mocked for, and, you're crazy and you're being, ignorant and you're, trying to lie to people and on and on.
Conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Like I'm curious how this January 20 is going to go. Trump's going to be sworn in. And I've been told that there will be an abortion ban nationally day one.
Right.
If we vote for Trump, then a woman's right to choose is going to be gone forever, and he's going to do it on day one. So I'm going to be very curious to read the headlines on January 21, because all these Democrats told me it was going to happen. So they couldn't have been lying, or they couldn't have been misled. So I'm sure that's going to happen on January 21. And if not, I'm going to look at the paper again in January 22 and go, it still hasn't happened. But yet they were so sure. Yet
to me, that's an opportunity.
Right.
That cognitive dissonance is an opportunity for me on my end. The dishonest media who says that, you guys aren't going to be around in a few years. If you don't straighten up and fly right, you can't imagine you're going to compete with me and still be in business by 2030. So
folks like Zuckerberg,
there's that.
You get it.
Yeah. And then with the politicians, so they told you Trump was literally Hitler. And then at Jimmy Carter's memorial service, you see Obama smiling and laughing. You were lied to.
Correct.
You were lied to. And if they were wrong and lying about that, what else? And so I think there's a lot of people who are going to open their eyes and they might not identify as Republicans or even conservatives.
Right.
But they say, who's telling the truth?
Who's
telling the truth?
I'm a pretty good detail guy. I keep lists and what have you, as you might imagine, because of my professional background and what have you. I may or may not have a big list documented of people who said certain things during the campaign that I might have been building for the last 6 months or so. And it will be fun to hold people accountable from a platform the size of the Michigan Republican Party. And we'll do that. And we'll do it for a couple reasons. One, I mean, let's face it, it's kind of going to be fun. And two, more importantly than my personal entertainment and your personal entertainment, it's going to open the eyes of those citizens you were talking about, the people who might not even naturally be conservatives, but they're going to go, wow, I did see a commercial that said if I voted for this state rep and they got in, I'd lose my right to choose forever. And no, hospitals wouldn't take me in, and on and on and on. And yet that person won, and none of this is happening. And that's only one example. I have a few of them.
And another thing I would cite, and man, it's biblical. God meant it for good. We think about the 2022. I was certainly heartbroken with that abortion law that was passed. Every decent person was. And then you think about it a little bit more and you say, okay, well, the people who think that the most important issue in life is being able to kill your offspring, they won. But by the grace of God, that doesn't have to affect my offspring. Doesn't have to affect your offspring. So what are we talking about? These people's relationship with their kids. And then the other thing is, okay, so that kind of doesn't actually affect me. In the Christian sense, it does, but doesn't really. But the other thing is, by winning, they took it off the table.
Correct. But
They took it off the table. So it's a blessing in disguise, because every time some Democrat like Whitmer, she tried to get the national Democrats to go with abortion again. They went to the same well and this time found it was dry. It's only going to get drier, diminishing returns.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, they did push it in Michigan in state legislative races, in the Supreme Court race. They were trying to say that, if you didn't elect their candidates, I know those are nonpartisan seats, but if they didn't elect their two preferred candidates, that abortion policy would change in Michigan. And
right.
I don't know for the life of me how that could happen given the vote that was taken in 2022. The Supreme Court has some powers, but one of them is not to overturn that ballot initiative. So it was a flat-out lie. It was a flat-out mislead. It was a flat-out fearmonger that worked in a couple cases, but yeah, fortunately the people caught on to the lion's share of it, and we saw that from the Republican results we got in November.
Absolutely. Scott, thank you so much for taking the time. We'll get you out of here on this one. Where can people learn more about you?
Thanks. So the website is my last name, Greenlee, the number 4, migopchair.com. Greenlee, the number 4, migop.com. My personal email and cell and everything links from there. And I just look forward to talking to people, continuing to share the vision, and really rolling up my sleeves and working hard in the next 2 years to make sure we party like it's 2010 in November of 2026. Thanks for having me on. I'll come back anytime. God bless you.
Awesome. God bless, Scott. Thank you.